Now that we have got our enemy agent patrolling between our two waypoints, the next step is to get it to look for the player and chase the player when it sees the player. So we're going to do this using something called array cast. So array cast is an invisible line from one point to another, and we can get information about the things that it hits, right? So we're going to do array cast forward in front of our flyer, and if that invisible line crosses the player or crosses any object, we're going to check to see if it has a certain component, right? A certain script attached, which in this case only the player will have, this damage transfer script. And then if we do have that component, then we're going to say, okay, yes, we've seen the player. Let's chase after the player. And when we get close enough to the player, we're going to spawn an explosion, which will potentially kill the player, right? So we have a kind of a very simple attack behavior here where the flyer just moves towards the enemy, tries to crash into them and blow up. And so we're going to set that up now. So in our graph, right, what we want to do, we're going to add, let's add it to patrol 1. We'll copy it over to patrol 2. We're going to add a new action, which is going to be called array cast. So type ray, I'll pull it up. So in our raycast, we can choose where we want to raycast from, the direction we want to raycast away from our starting point. So we're going to use the owner. We're going to use the flyer as the starting point. The direction is going to be not a variable. We're going to hard code it. And the direction is just going to be 1 or forward on the z-axis, right? So forward in the direction that the flyer is facing in along the z or z axis. And so the space that we're going to do that in is going to be the self, so relative to the flyer. So meaning if the flyer turns, that space is going to turn relative to the flyer. So it's always going to be forward in the direction that the flyer is facing. What we want to do then is check when we hit something, we want to get some information about it, right? So what we're going to do is down here in the result area, we have this store hit object option. And so what we're going to do is make a new variable, and we're going to call this hit object. And now we can also, some folks were asking about performance questions. If you want, you could have this happen not once every frame, but every other frame. Like if we set it, there's a tooltip. It says, see how often to cast array. 0 is once without repeating. 1 equals every frame. 2 is every other frame, and so on, right? So we can use this repeat interval to raycast less often if we wanted to. In this case, I'm going to raycast every frame. Now, we can specify a color for the ray. Yellow is fine in this case. We can turn on the debug option so that we can see it. Now, what we're going to do, we've stored potentially our hit object in our hit object variable. Now we're going to check using the has component action. And so we're going to check not on the owner. We're going to specify a game object. We're going to use a variable, and we're going to check on the hit object. Does the hit object have, and we're going to pick, in this case, it's in the node namespace, and it is called VP damage transfer. So this is one of the scripts that's part of UFPS that is attached to the player's hitbox, and I'll show it to you in a second. So we're going to check if this script is attached to the object that we hit. So if we hit a wall, it won't have this, and we'll know we didn't hit the player. And if something has this, then it's definitely the player, right? So we're going to select that. So now, if we have found the VP damage transfer component, then we're going to raise the true event. And the true event is going to be a new event called saw player. We can add a transition for it. And now we're going to branch our state, right? We're not going to go to patrol 2. We're going to go to a new state. And this state is going to be called chase player. And we'll drag a reference, or we'll drag a transition from saw player to chase player, right? So now we're in the chase player state, right? We've seen the player, and now we want to move towards the player. So we're actually going to just reuse our get property, set property, get distance actions, right? And our float compare action. And we're going to copy all of these. We're going to copy the selected actions, and we're going to paste them into chase player. But in this case, we're going to drag in a reference to the player game object. So now we're getting the distance to the player and moving towards the player, not one of the waypoints. And here, and that's almost all that we need. Now I'm going to actually set the arrival distance to be a little bit bigger because one is actually too low, but the two things just collide and get stuck. So we're going to make it a little bit bigger so that when it's a little further away, it will say, yeah, I'm close enough, I'm going to blow up. And now we'll add a transition to arrived at destination, and we're going to transition to a new state, and that state is going to be called explode. So we're going to transition from arrived at destination. Once we get close enough to the player, we're going to explode. So first of all, let's just see this portion of the behavior in action. And so if we enter play mode, we can see that there is a game object, which is a child of the player spawned called trigger. And this has attached the VP damage transfer script that we're looking for, right? So let's go down here. And let's turn around. And now when the robot turns around, we can see that line. Let's see, did he miss me? Okay, so I've missed a step here. Let's take a look. So this is one thing I like about the way PlayMaker works. If you miss something, oh, I know what I did. I only set it up for Patrol 1, right, not for Patrol 2. So right now we're in Patrol 2, and I'm not going to see myself. Let's actually move this up to here so that we can see it while we're going. And now... No, I did. Let's see what I'm missing here. Okay, it's a good teachable moment here. So what did I do wrong? What I did wrong was I had my raycast set up correctly, right? We could see the raycast going in the scene. But if we look at the has component action, I was not doing that every frame, right? So I was just doing it once when we entered the state, and the robot was looking at the wall, right? And it says, nope, everything's fine. So we're going to need to turn on every frame and make sure that we're in the Patrol 1 state, right? So let me try to run down here before it gets to the... I was going to switch. We'll have to catch him when he gets over here. Let's actually copy it to both so we don't have to do that. So let's copy over our behavior. We're going to copy the... So that it's in both states, we're going to copy the raycast and has component. Copy selected. Paste actions after. And now let's add a transition also to chase player, right? Put it there. Okay, now let's test. There we go. So now we can see, right? And we can see it in the graph. And now, aha, I'm too fast for you, silly robot. Oh, see, it's gone to the explode state, right? Because it did get close enough. All right, good robot, good robot. Okay, so now we have our ability to see the player, move towards the player, and what we need is our explode behavior, right? So let's select our explode state, and we are going to, in the action browser, we are going to add a activate game object action, and we're going to set activate to false. So this is going to deactivate the robot, basically make it disappear. But what we also want to do is we want to create object, right? And this is going to instantiate a prefab. And the game object that we want to instantiate, we're going to pick from the project, and this is called, if I type explosion, we'll find the object called grenade explosion. This is a pre-made grenade that's part of UFPS. that's already set up to play an explosion and a sound and deal damage to the player. So we're going to spawn that and then deactivate the flyer, right? So the flyer is going to disappear. The grenade explosion is going to appear, and the player is going to take damage. So let's test that out. Okay, so he saw me. Boom. All right, excellent. So that works nicely. So we have a flyer that can patrol between two different waypoints. It can look in front of itself using a raycast, detect when it's seen the player as opposed to a wall, chase towards the player, and explode when it gets in range. The next step is going to be to set up the AI for our turret enemy, and we're going to do that in a moment.